Hi, I want to talk a little bit about immigration to the United States after the Civil War. Immigrants came to the United States basically for the same reasons that they come any other time, and that is they were trying to build a better life. Take, for example, Chinese immigrants that came in were so instrumental in building the Transcontinental Railroad starting in California and working towards the east. They were coming in and they could make more money working for the railroad, even though they worked for half of what they could work for somewhere else. It was so much more than they could ever make in China that many of them felt like they were wealthy. Many of them actually did take the money that they had earned and went back to China, took that money home. Same thing, Sweden. A lot of German immigrants are going to come in, a lot of Irish immigrants. They're going to come for different reasons. For example, Germany is coming from a period where they're trying to consolidate, and they're going from being a bunch of little bitty countries to being one larger country about the size of Texas. And for the people who were on the wrong sides of a lot of those wars, they end up coming to the United States to get away from persecution or imprisonment. Ireland, they're going through an Irish potato famine, and the English response to the Irish potato famine was, let the Irish die. The official policy was that when the Irish population is down low enough, that we're going to remake their economy and remake their culture and basically reinvent Ireland. So their choice was either starve to death in Ireland or come to the United States. England didn't care either way because they still get what they want. So people are coming in to America, and sometimes they're welcomed and sometimes they're not. First of all, there's so many people coming in that the United States is actually going to have to build a port specifically to get people to come in. In class, we'll talk about what Ellis Island was like, but I'll tell you right now, its purpose was to process immigrants. And processing those immigration they weren't necessarily treated well, but was relatively easy. You had to come in, you had to prove that you didn't have any lice, you had to prove that you could hear, that you didn't walk with a limp, and that you weren't cognitively disabled, what they would call an idiot. And then all of a sudden you could come in. You didn't even necessarily have to speak English, or you did have to be able to read. Well, I'll show you some of these things in class that you had to be able to do. But immigration in the country was really pretty easy by comparison if you were healthy. But on the West Coast, they had Angel Island. Angel Island served the same purpose, but for people coming in from Asia. Now, because people from Asia did not look like the people from Europe, they weren't always treated the same way. For example, the Chinese are going to be treated very poorly. They're going to actually be discriminated against. The reason we have Chinatowns all across cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Oakland is because immigrants from China were so disliked that they all banded together in neighborhoods for mutual safety. And these Chinatowns, there's also going to be Korean towns, there's going to be Little Tokyo, there's going to be a lot of towns like this that are built for mutual protection and also to help preserve a little bit of that culture. Even then, there's going to be so many people from Asia that the United States is actually going to pass a law in 1882 called the Chinese Exclusion Act that says it's going to restrict how many people can come from China. But it's also going to say that if you're of Chinese descent, you can never be a United States citizen. Now, this is a blatant violation of the 14th Amendment and very racist, but nevertheless, it's an example of how we wanted the immigrants to come in because they would work for cheap, because they could make money, they could work for half of what an American would work, but that's still 2 or 3 times what they were making back home. And so, in one sense, they're kind of living the high life. They're living better lives than they were back in their home countries. And so we wanted that cheap labor. We wanted that economic growth that comes from immigration. But there was this fear that if we had too many immigrants, that maybe we weren't going to be American enough. So they started passing restrictions. Eventually, these restrictions are going to become more and more restrictive till we have things like quota systems. For example, in the United States, only 50 people a year were allowed to immigrate from the Philippines. 50 people is not very many people, as you can imagine. So now, if you were Hawaii, you could actually immigrate as many Filipinos or people of Asian descent, people from Asia into Hawaii as you needed to, because they would work on the pineapple and the sugar plantations. And so they needed that cheap labor, and Hawaii was an island, and it's not even our island until the 1890s. But that island over there, and so they didn't see it as being a real risk to America's cultural identity. They're going to form segregated schools for immigrants. California is going to segregate not just by race but also by nationality. For example, Japanese students went to one school, Chinese students went to another school, and neither of those schools would include white people. And so it kind of becomes very convoluted and at times expensive to maintain all these parallel systems of education. 120 years ago, I'm a public school teacher, and there's a concern about what do we do with all the students who don't speak English, right? Well, the reality is 120 years ago, there were more students in our public education system that don't speak English than there are today. And you might go into a typical school and have 20 people speaking 16 different languages. And so their response was everybody learns English. Well, for that matter, it's going to change because of that immigration. We're actually going to have to change how we do public education. Public education begins to serve the purpose not only of educating them in reading and writing and arithmetic, but also on patriotism and how to be a good American. For example, they're going to invent this thing called the Pledge of Allegiance, where people pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. You've probably seen it and said it, and that comes around during this time to try to promote Americanization of immigrants coming in during this time. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more in class. In fact, one of the things we're going to do in class is we're going to talk about what it means to come into the United States and some of the testing that comes with that, and how they were treated in class. But how they were treated depended on a lot of different factors. Overall, there is a kind of sort of, hey, immigration is good because we need people in the frontier, we need people to work, but there's also this fear that too much immigration will make America not America anymore. So one of the strange things we're going to find this semester is this constant push and pull between two sides of an issue, and we're constantly trying to, as a society, trying to walk that fine line between the pushing and the pulling, and to try to help us to better navigate that system. All right, until then, I'll talk to you in class. Have a great day.